concepción distinta y diferente de que será la vida. Socialismo, o muerte.
During the 60s and 70s in South America, thanks to the Cuban Revolution and liberation theology, a new generation of young people started to believe that we would be able to change the world. We believed that the impossible was really possible. And we believed that we could achieve social justice and peace in Chile under a democratically elected socialist government which was fully committed to radical changes for the oppressed. I became part of a movement working to transform the lives of poor Chileans, without knowing then that we would have to pay a very heavy price for that commitment. During those days, running away from the secret police under the Pinochet dictatorship, we feared that we could lose our newborn baby daughter, Rocio.
Our work is very broad and wide-ranging. Services including youth support services, family support, advice services, sports, health. I've always wanted to do work which is helping people and socially making a difference. That is very much motivated by my own experience of coming to Wales with my parents as a baby, as refugees, and understanding from a very young age how political and social injustices play out. I just remember those are the conversations that were in my house, and those are the first conversations that I ever really remember. So obviously not conversations that my parents would have directly with me when I was very young, but I would hear them in the house talking. My parents would talk with other families about the political situation in Chile.
This government, with its new measures, attracted a new generation that felt this government was striving to create a much nicer, fairer, decent society with less inequality. And at the time, I wasn't fully aware about political issues, but I did notice that that was a major event taking place in the country. I find myself in this situation with 3 other university students and a French priest who has just arrived to Chile in a missionary capacity. And the 4 of us, I suppose, partly led by this French priest who came with very new radical ideas about what it was the meaning to be a true Christian. Essentially, he was somebody who was an admirer from the liberation theology, whereby Jesus is seen as somebody who sent a message to Christians in striving for fairness, social justice, and peace, and to achieve that in the actual reality. Then, as part of this interest, we went to live to a shanty town in the city of Talca, which is in the center of Chile. And in this shanty town, there were 360 families who had been there for 20 or more years, who arrived from the countryside, different places, in the hope of finding a job in the city, but they couldn't. So they just started a shanty town where there were no basic services. And these families have their own families, and their children, their own families, started to grow and grow. And previous governments have sent politicians to make promises for new houses, new hopes, but people knew exactly those were just traditional politicians who didn't mean what they said. We as Christians at that time, we felt that we have to actually be consistent with our views. If we wanted to actually know how the poor live, we have to live in a shanty town like that to find out. And so we started to live in that shanty town on a permanent basis. And then, to me personally, was a big eye-opener, because at the time I was university student reading social work. I was reading a lot about poverty, but it was one thing to read a book about poverty, and another thing is to be in an environment and to live with people who are poor and who hasn't got drinking water, who hasn't got toilet, who hasn't got sanitation, who hasn't got the basics. Our condition at the time were not exactly the same. We managed to get what is called in South American language a mediagua, which is basic, very fragile, minimal conditions for housing, and we had 3 small rooms for the 4 of us, but we were in the same place with the shantytown dwellers there. And our initial work with the shantytown people there was to run a summer camp for the children, because that summer was a very hot summer, and the children have nothing to do. They didn't have a playground, they didn't have resources, didn't have a swimming pool. So we used to take them to trips. We have university friends and colleagues who help us to run literacy lessons for the parents, games, singing events, sports events, and we created an environment of a proper summer camp in whereby the children and their parents became involved, and they were quite taken by the interest of these university students and these priests, initially, quite rightly so, in a suspicious manner, because it was so unusual. But our spirit was within the framework. This was a new society, that younger people were keen to work together and help those who were less well off. Our mission was just to empower these people, but we also started to try to persuade the Allende's government. These people needed a decent little hut or housing estate with the basic. So with them, we started to help the organization in seeking the approval from the government, and because the government was quite pro-social justice, after about a year and a half, we managed to persuade the government that they would build a very modest housing estate for 360 families. By that time, we were well established in the community as people who were well known, and we did have the credibility that we were not visitors, we were not politicians, we were not activists just coming for a weekend or for a month or for a week. We were residents in the same shantytown, so we have the respect, the affection, and the support from those people in the shantytown. Now, we were very close to continue moving on with the building of this housing estate. The materials were arriving, the fences had been erected to start building this housing estate. On the 10th of September 73, when this new small housing estate were going to start to be built for our shantytown friends, that was the 10th of September 73, we had a big celebration for that achievement, because officially the government of Allende was going to start building that housing estate. And then the person who represented the president of Chile in that city of Talca came to celebrate this big achievement that night. And we had a nice gathering of celebration. We went to bed with our friends very late after that celebration, feeling that we have achieved something so special. These people who now we have been living with for about a year and a half, we are going to have a decent little, no house, but something much better. And it was absolutely fantastic. However, the 9/11, the 11th of September 73, about 7 o'clock in the morning, we had, compañeros, compañeros, golpe militar, arranquen, que o si no los van a matar, which meant, comrades, please, run away, there is a military coup, run away, otherwise they will kill you. And that was the voice of a dear shantytown dweller friend, Domingo was his name, who came to alert us. How did he know that? It's because all the radios throughout the country are being broadcasting the military bans, the military orders, that people should be surrendered immediately, otherwise they will be executed. And when they say people, they refer to those people who they deem to be a threat against a military regime. And sadly, we, and I, was one of those. So my name was read by the radio broadcast that unless I would actually go to the nearest military barrack immediately, I would be executed. And that was the beginning of a long, long nightmare that the country of Chile, I myself as a young person, could have never, never imagined. Our 9/11, the 9/11 that sadly the world has not known as much it should have been, affected me, my friends, and my country in a way which it would be extremely difficult to describe, and secondly, extremely difficult to imagine for somebody who has not been present during those circumstances. After I was alerted by our dear friend Domingo in advising us to run away quickly because otherwise we were going to be killed, I left the shanty town, but not knowing where to go, and not knowing why, and not knowing what to do. I already had heard that our president has been killed. Thousands of people have been persecuted. There was a military curfew every night, whereby people were not allowed to get out of their houses, and where all the streets in every city of the country were patrolled by military people, and detaining anyone who, in their views, was suspicious. I tried to find hiding with friends who in the past have offered me that possibility because there was some awareness that that could have happened. However, the cruelty already now reported in the whole country was so threatening that friends, initially truly well motivated, changed their minds, and I just found myself being left on the street without not knowing where to go. Fortunately, I ended up the first night that I ran away in the house of somebody who was a public sector engineer in the housing department, who actually was quite influential in deciding the beginning of the new housing state. And this person, although he had very different views to myself, he had towards me and my friends some sort of admiration for our Christian views and our Christian consequence and consistency in being with the poor people. So he actually allowed me to stay in his house, asked me to change my name so his family would not be in any doubt that I was running away, because that was dangerous. And then I spent the first night in hiding in his house. Subsequently, then I went to a church where two wonderful French priests allowed me to stay with them for a week. While I was there, I was listening to radio and hearing about the most brutal assassinations, including the assassination of a friend of mine who was living in another shanty town in the same city, who had been killed at the age of just 22 years of age, simply because of his views in supporting poor people. Then, after being in this church with the priest for about 10 days, and hearing that my name had been mentioned all the time in the radio, that if I wouldn't surrender myself, if I wouldn't go to the military authority, I would be executed, I received a message from my mother, who had been extremely worried, begging me to surrender to the military people because she thought that that was the best thing to do and I have nothing to fear. In a way to please her, perhaps, and in a way also not to create problems for this wonderful French priest who had welcomed in his place, I decided to go to the military barrack, and I gave myself in. As soon as I got in, I started to be beaten up, kicked, and interrogated in a very brutal way, alongside many other political prisoners. And after a few hours of extremely bad treatment, I was taken to an empty swimming pool. And that swimming pool has its walls stained with blood, probably from people who have already been there. And the irony of life taught me at the time that was exactly the same swimming pool I had been with my children friends from the shanty town previously, taking them for swimming lessons, whereby they had, for the first time in their life, the opportunity to be in a swimming pool because they were poor. But because of Allende's government has policies to use community resources for the disadvantaged, that was perfectly fine in that context. But that context has gone now, and I was a political prisoner, and I started to be interrogated in this empty swimming pool stained with blood on its wall. And then the person who was interrogating me was Comandante Zucchino. And Comandante Zucchino started to interrogate me about arms, because the opposition and the military people had been given the version that we were going to kill them, which was totally untrue. But it was so well advertised in a way that they believed that. After an hour of interrogation, Comandante Zucchino got very frustrated because he couldn't get information about arms from me or from friends who were trying to do something to fight them back. He took me out of the swimming pool and he just took the gun from his pocket and put it inside my mouth and said, "You son of a bitch, this is your last chance. Either you talk or that's it." By that time, I couldn't say that I was extremely frightened. I was, but in a way, I saw that attempt to finish me as a way out, as a way to escape that torture, as a way to escape that nightmare. So I didn't have the time to feel more frightened. For whatever reason, Comandante Zucchino didn't shoot me, and here I am. However, after that, I was taken to the local prison, where as soon as I got there and the doors opened, I saw about 200 people who I've been working with for the last 2 or 3 years in trying to support this new government in creating a new society. And all of them, although I was looking at them, to me they look like ghosts. Somehow we have lost our spirit, we have lost our souls. We were bodies totally empty. And I can well imagine that, because that was the way I felt as a young person who actually was so happy to be able to be part of building a new, fairer society. And having made actual progress with that project, finding ourselves, all of us in prison, some of them being killed, some of them being disappeared. It was beyond belief. That's the reason why I saw, and I will always keep this image of 200 bodies without souls. I spent approximately 3 months in prison. One night, I was taken into solitary confinement because the day before, approximately 25 people came and brought fruit, brought magazine, and brought me hope, and brought me their affection. But the authority of that prison thought that I was planning something to get out of the prison, or planning a rebellion among the prison. So because of that, I was taken into solitary confinement. And there I spent about 2 weeks. And then one night I was taken out of solitary confinement about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning by secret police who blindfolded me, scaffolded me, and took me away from the prison into a secret location for interrogation. In that place, I was placed electricity on my head and different parts of the body, pressing on for information about arms, about people who were plotting to actually fight against the military people. I didn't have that information, so I couldn't give it. So a few days later, they brought me back into prison, and then by the end of the 3rd month, for reasons which I cannot fully understand, I was released. A young man, originally from a very rural background in the center of Chile, had to move to the capital of Chile, Santiago, for reasons totally beyond my control, just to survive. And along those reasons, I felt the need to have to change my name. My ordinary name I was known since I was born until the military coup was Tolo, a nickname which has nothing to do with my real name. But to protect myself from the secret police, I decided to change my name, or started to use my real name, which was totally unknown to anybody. So I arrived into Santiago, the capital of Chile, at the time when hundreds of workers, especially people who had been promoting the Allende government, had been imprisoned, had either been killed or being disappeared. I was privileged in being given the position to work there as a social worker, to be able to listen firsthand the reports from mothers, wives, sisters, grandmothers, grandfathers, who were coming at the time to report the disappearance of their loved ones. That fortunately brought a humanitarian response from people who was prepared to say this is not right. And those people were initially mainly from the Catholic Church, which at the time raised its voice, appealing to the authorities to measure their behavior and their responses. This organization operated for approximately a year in such a successful manner simply because it was the only place where any ordinary Chilean citizen was able to go and report the atrocities of human rights abuses that this person of his family or her family have actually gone through. But the success of this organization, the Committee for Peace, gave concerns to the military dictatorship because information was being passed on not only to the whole country but also abroad. And this led the military people to demand that this Committee for Peace should stop its functions. Fortunately, at the time, the Catholic Church had a Cardinal Raúl Silva Enriquez, who was very determined to demand that the work of the Catholic Church and all the organizations supporting it in defending human rights should continue. And as well as complying with the demand from the dictatorship in ending the work of the Committee for Peace, which was the first human rights organization protecting lives in Chile, they immediately created an organization called the Solidarity Department of the Catholic Church, which in Spanish was La Vicaría de la Solidaridad. It was a continuation of the same work, the same institution, the same personnel, but under the different legal denomination. And because this time the Catholic Church officially took on board this responsibility, the military regime was not able to stop it. And through that work, in which I was involved myself as a social worker, I got to know extremely painful cases of human rights abuses. Remembering a fellow human rights worker, José Manuel Parada, who had done tremendous work in documenting all these atrocities based on evidence reported by the victims. And one day, José Manuel Parada went to collect his daughters from school, as he would normally do at the end of the workday. But that day, he was detained by the carabineros, the Chilean police, took away, and at the same time, 3 or 4 other people known to him had been also detained by the same police. And this raised the alarm to the family and to people like human rights organizations like La Vicaría de la Solidaridad. And after a couple of days, José Manuel Parada, as well as 3 other friends, compañeros of his, were found assassinated. They had been decapitated by the secret police and left in an abandoned plot in the vicinities of Santiago, the capital of Chile. He was a person with such a humanity that would not hesitate to help anyone, and he himself helped me under special circumstances. When I knew about the detention of a very dear friend, and I was fearing the detention of another friend, I asked José Manuel, would he accompany me in his car to alert another friend to prevent that detention? He said, of course, we would go. And José Manuel, on that day, took me to the place to try to alert this person, but unfortunately, or fortunately, as you would know soon, we couldn't find the address because perhaps I was mistaken about the actual address. So we didn't get there. But José Manuel went with me. In the evening of that same day, my compañera, my wife, Cristina, accompanied me to try to find out the address to alert this friend that she was running the risk of being detained because a close friend of her and ours has already been detained too. We were just 100 meters before reaching the actual address where our friend lived. And all of a sudden, an ordinary lady from that place, a pobladora, come and said, stop, stop, run away, run away. The secret police is there. They've been there all day. And anyone who comes is detained and then disappear. Please, run away, don't go to that place. And if it wasn't for that lady, for that pobladora, for that compañera, for that woman that I wish I would have asked her name, we would not be alive. And that morning, José Manuel Parada and myself would have disappeared simply because we were on a mission in trying to prevent another person to become a disappeared person. It was, at the time, mine and José Manuel's luck. And it was also, later on the same day in the evening, the luck of my compañera Cristina and mine. But months later, José Manuel Parada ran out of luck because his commitment continued. He was a well-known worker for the Catholic Church in the area of human rights, but he has to pay with his life in the most cruel manner by having been decapitated and left abandoned in a plot. That was one case which it pains the whole country, not just people who knew José Manuel Parada, because of the way and the man and the cruelty involved. I remember him because he was a person with such a big humanity that it makes it much more difficult to accept how a wonderful life was taken away in such a brutal way. And that kind of atrocities continue in Chile for many, many years. One night, we had a phone call very late in the night, and this was the mother of a dear friend of ours that used to live with us in the Población Arturo Prat in Talca when we were students at the university. And this mother was asking us, please, please, leave your house and run away now. The secret police just came to my house and raided and took my daughter away, Alicia, and now she's disappeared. And the secret police are after you. They were questioning and asking, where were you, because they want to detain you. So I'm begging you, please, run away, run away. So, hearing this mother already in pain because of the disappearance of her daughter, and having the kindness in alerting us to run away to prevent that the same would happen to us, we didn't hesitate and took her advice. So we had our child then, our baby daughter Rocio, who was just 2 or 3 months old at the time, and we left our apartment without knowing where to go to try to protect ourselves, because we knew that the secret police could arrive at any time, and then we would have become disappear, and so would become our daughter disappear. To prevent ourselves and to prevent our daughter, my wife went one direction. Eventually, she had the luck in receiving the kind support from a French couple who were a cultural representative of France in Santiago, who had the bravery and the kindness in allowing her to stay with them, as well as our daughter. And I went in a different direction, because if we would have stayed together, we ran the risk, and the 3 of us becoming disappear without any one of us being able to alert somebody to help us. I ended up with somebody who was totally unknown. He was an architect, he was a Christian, who didn't need to know me, I didn't know him, but he was one of the people who were ready to support those people who were in trouble, like I was. And from there on, we continue weeks and months in hiding from the secret police. From those 2 places, weeks later, we end up in another different place, which was a convent in the coast of Santiago, which was known as Punta de Tralca. In there, my wife, our baby daughter, and myself spent a few days with a different name, again to try to protect ourselves from the secret police. We started to reflect about the need perhaps to leave the country, but we didn't know how, because we were quite afraid, not only for ourselves, but on this occasion, particularly because of our baby daughter. Weeks later, we had the kindness of friends who offered their house for us to actually be in hiding there for another few weeks. Eventually, we received a kind offer to consider going to Great Britain under the auspices of the World University Service, which was prepared to offer us a grant to be able to continue our studies after we were expelled from the University of Chile because of political reasons. And it took us a few weeks to reflect, to consider this offer, which on the one hand, it offered us the hope of being safe and protecting our daughter. On the other, it put us in the very painful dilemma in having to leave our home country, having to leave our families, having to leave our friends, our language, our past, and more importantly, our compañeros and compañeras, the poor people that we fought with for a better society. And we felt extremely troubled by the thought of that perhaps by we leaving our country, we were going to be betraying them, which was something that we never contemplated. Weeks of agonizing thoughts about that went by without knowing what to do. However, during the context, and still working with the human rights organization, we became more and more aware of the real danger that we were running and our baby daughter was running in becoming disappeared people. We already knew that in the next door neighbor country, Argentina, hundreds of babies had been disappeared following the imprisonment of their mothers. And that was a thought that perhaps played on our mind to consider the need that we have to say goodbye to our country. We thought that we could do that perhaps for temporary basis, 1 or 2 years until the secret police would forget about us and we could come back. So we didn't pack everything, we just took the essentials. We never contemplated that the day we left our country wasn't going to be just for 1 or 2 years. Since then, now over 45 years have passed by, and the young people who left their home today are not that young, and now a life has gone by, and they have experienced what it is like to leave home. Personally, the memory that still captures my mind is the last time I was able to give a hug to my mother while she was still alive. And she, almost instinctively knowing that was going to be the last time that we were going to see each other, she almost became glued to my body in a way that she would not let it go and could not actually separate from myself, and neither could I. And those memories do not fade away. And I think it is something that, sadly, it has to be believed. But this is something that people who have to leave their home countries sometimes who have to continue carrying with them forever. El término de la dictadura me encontró en Gran Bretaña, en Gales.
Amazing to learn the wealth of experience and skills and expertise that people who have to come to Wales, the prestigious jobs that they've had in their home countries, and all of that experience that they bring, and you know, if they are well supported and given the opportunity, they can then apply that and, you know, to Wales and help other people in Wales. It's just about providing the right opportunity and support for that experience and that expertise to be shared.